Um, Val Desport here with Dawson Smith, Avison Young, Houston-based industrial expert, sales and leasing, correct? Is there anything I'm missing there? You guys focus
No,
on?
sir. No, you've encompassed it.
Okay. Can you quickly kind of recap your career so far in real estate, how you got into real estate,
Yeah,
how
happy
you
to.
ended up? Yeah.
So I attended Texas A&M University, received an engineering degree there in industrial distribution. Actually spent my first 2 years out of school working at Shell Oil Company, helping them with supply chain and manufacturing projects on the downstream side of the business. A lot of product networking through our own blending plants as well as turnkey third-party plants, and then networking that throughout the country. Um, when the pandemic came around, uh, things slowed down a little bit. I was in kind of a graduate program straight out of school and had gone to exclusively remote work. And at that point, uh, kind of missed that face to face in the office interaction, was working more in a supply chain, capital projects type role, but really wasn't out driving revenue, more, uh, cost reduction oriented. And I had some prior internship experience working for a retail developer here in Houston, kind of had that real estate itch and went out and kind of networked my way into industrial tenant representation predominantly. So joined Avison Young about 4 years ago. Came in as an analyst, supporting a team of roughly 8 brokers, doing both industrial and office transactions, primarily focused on occupiers. Uh, During that time, with my background from my degree and my time at Shell, quickly kind of found an affinity for the industrial side. What I also liked about industrial was the fact that you don't necessarily need to exclusively represent tenants. Like where in office, there's more of a perceived conflict of interest where you either need to be a landlord guy or a tenant guy or an investor guy. In the industrial side, you can kind of wear more hats, and found that just to be really compelling. So coming out of that analyst job, since then I've been an industrial broker on this team in Houston, predominantly focused in industrial properties in Houston. My background, kind of how I was brought up, was in the tenant rep game, but as of the past couple years have been more focused, as well as been more focused on industrial investor representation, agency leasing, and occupier services as well. So all Houston industrial is kind of what I would say is my specialty.
Yeah. So you're doing some tenant rep where tenant, I mean, sometimes do you have clients sometimes that they're thinking about being a tenant, but they could also be an investor, they could also be a developer.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, we've represented companies on the occupier side who are occupied facilities. And, historically, what had made sense for a lot of folks was to, if they ever needed to move out of that building, consolidate, expand, whatever, just a clean sale of the building. But we've actually found, certain private business owners or even larger companies that have, alternative asset um, branches in the company that would allow them to retain some real estate, even if they're not operating out of it, to go in and kind of find a creative solution to backfill that building in a way that isn't just your traditional clean disposition sale. And so we've been working with some groups on that. We had a big project up in North Houston, over an 80-acre site manufacturing park that was single occupied by one group. Uh, we actually won that assignment based off the recommendation, hey, if you can stomach being a landlord here, let's not do a clean dispo of this. Let's actually multi-tenant this park. There's a lot of rate appreciation to be captured there through these smaller tenant sizes. And you also, Mr. Business Owner, receive some flexibility if you ever want to, move back into part of that or use some of the outdoor storage on that site or anything along those lines. And so um, I love the tenant side of the business and learning the way I did there, because once you understand the occupancy and what really makes the market tick, which are, these leases and these sales by actual users of real estate, it makes me more savvy when I'm talking to a landlord or an investor or, trying to put together a development site because we have such a good pulse on where the current market demand is. Um, we feel like we can uncover some opportunities that a traditional, just investor only person might not be able to find.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, knowing where the demand side is gives you insight on the supply side, I guess, ownership side.
Yeah, we're about as downstream of real estate as you can be when you're dealing with tenants and buyers. So
Yeah, yeah. Sounds like there's a lot of creativity that you can kind of bring to industrial space as well, versus being siloed, like you were saying, into one kind of role. You guys can kind of like put things together that are very creative.
absolutely, we really enjoyed it. I'm on a team here with 10 brokers, and a lot of them are focused on the office side, but I've got two partners over here in Houston as well, where 100% of what we do is industrial. We also kind of pride ourselves in that, where we're not your typical tenant rep team, right? Where um, we can only help you with your office leasing, and if there's an industrial requirement that comes up, we're going to muscle through it, but we don't really know what we're doing, or vice versa with industrial guys doing office. We're able to strategically kind of team up based on where, our kind of sub-market experience lies, or, this guy is a heavy manufacturing broker who's got a lot of experience there, but his office tenant partner um, has kicked up some type of requirement that would be better suited by this other guy on our team
Mm,
helping him out with it. We're
yeah,
capable to kind of cross collaborate like that, and we always
that's cool.
enjoy it. So
Yeah, that's a large team. You don't run into teams that large typically
hmm
within brokerage firms. So it's pretty cool that you guys can offer that. Um, well, so what would you say are kind of like trends in the market, the overall Houston industrial market, overall trends that you guys are seeing?
yeah,
Um, yeah,
happy to touch on that, and I'd say it by my metrics and by how I feel about it. I'd say the Houston industrial market continues to be strong. Um, Now, it depends how you define success because that's really relative, right? So everyone knows about the kind of COVID industrial boom, and if you compare our market today to that, uh, absolutely things have slowed down, right? Um, you know, 2023 this time last year, we have absorbed about half the amount as of today as we have this time last year, so 51%. Um, and that 2023 was kind of the tail end of the COVID roar. 22 kind of carrying the majority of that load. So a 51% reduction, you'd go, wait, this industrial market's slowing down. Oh no, right? Well, quite the opposite, because if you look at pre-pandemic absorption numbers, we're still 20% above those pre-pandemic absorption numbers. So the way I kind of like to explain it to people is that are we going to mow down 500,000 million square foot leases over and over and over again, like we did in late 2021, 2022, and early 2023? No, that's not really the market that Houston is. But has the bar been raised to where we have all these large tenants now? We built a ton of space, and it's for the most part been absorbed. We're still posting positive absorption. Yes, you know, so single digit vacant, depending on whose report you read. We're about 7.5 to 8% vacant. We've crept up a little since that pandemic roar, but not much. We've got a ton of supply coming on line, but deliveries have slowed down dramatically. I think I wrote it down here. Yeah, project deliveries are outpacing our new starts as it exists today. We've absorbed about 7.5 million feet year to date. Like I said, 51% less than the same time last year, but 21% better than the pre-pandemic uh, average. And under construction today, we've got about 11 million square feet currently. And same time last year, we had 27 million. So
wow.
Um, with the interest rates kind of creeping away the way they did, and then construction costs got high, and market dynamics kind of said, "Hey, pump the brakes a little bit."
Mhm.
The big box institutional style industrial space that everyone talks about, that's slowed down because the demand for those really large buildings has naturally tapered off after a massive supply chain disruption that happened during the pandemic. But it's a tale of two markets. When you go to the smaller building size, call it 100,000 feet and under, those smaller, more regional and local tenants who were here before the pandemic, they were here during the pandemic, and they're going to be here forever. That's a really competitive market. Not a lot of people built those. That's sub 5% vacant in a lot of the submarkets that we track. And the rental rates have grown dramatically. And even, Houston across the board has posted about 5% year over year rent growth. That's a healthy statistic too. But then you want to go back to the pandemic level and look at 20% rent growth. So like the pandemic raised the bar, but it also raised the investor expectations as to what a healthy industrial market looks like. And if you look at the fundamentals, we're single digit vacant, we're posting 5% rent growth, and we're positively absorbing above pre-pandemic levels. So all in all, I feel good about it.
Yeah, yeah. What I've seen and heard broad categorizations of industrial space. You've got like warehouse, you've got small bay, uh, you got manufacturing. Like how do you guys broadly categorize or get even more granular with categories of
Yeah,
industrial space? What we call industrial. There's like so many different variations
yeah.
of industrial.
We get very granular with it because it's to your point, you can't compare a manufacturing building to a institutional grade dock high distribution building, even if they're both, 150, 200,000 feet. It's completely different. One's tilt wall construction, one's metal construction. One has the, dock slab sitting above the grade. The other's a grade level facility. One's heavy power, one isn't. One has
Mhm.
cranes, the other doesn't. And so we try to segment that data out as much as possible so
Mhm.
we can, kind of equip these occupiers to make the right decisions. The way we kind of standardly track it, and we can subdivide it even more within these kind of categories, if you will, but there's manufacturing space, there's warehousing space, which kind of includes that distribution that we talked about. And then
Mhm.
there's like flex space. And so flex space typically is referring to sub 20,000 foot tenants. They're typically rear load style buildings where you see the office component up on the front and then the dock doors in the back. They're more shallow buildings where, these distribution buildings will have doors on both sides, right? You're just loading from the back. They're built rear load like that in order to carry kind of like a heavier office component up front, kind of like a
Mhm.
flex retail-ish industrial footprint. We track
Yeah.
that separate because those rates on those small spaces are so high. It would completely just kind of futz up all the numbers.
Right.
Um, and then within there, there's like little subgenres here and there. There's like industrial outdoor storage, or
Yeah.
there's like lab R&D type space, which is like kind of a little niche that you don't want to really include in your other data sets. But all in all, like speaking of that, the manufacturing space here in Houston specifically is really coming back. Uh,
Hmm.
So last time they were building speculatively delivered manufacturing buildings in Houston was 2014, 2015 era, back when we were in an oil boom. And
Hmm.
then basically from that time onwards, the market pivoted to building spec industrial distribution buildings.
Right.
And the pandemic really exacerbated that. But today, for the first time in, call it, the past 10 years, um, with kind of efforts of the former administration to bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States, oil and gas making a bounce back, and then you see all of this money coming in with the Inflation Reduction Act, which really unlocked a lot of capital for renewables users. Houston's the energy capital of the world, right? And so you're seeing a lot of clean new energy folks, oil and gas folks, whoever, wanting to lease manufacturing buildings here in Houston. And unfortunately, a lot of the high quality ones are user owned. So finally, it seems like the developers are starting to respond to that and build speculative crane ready buildings, which is great for everyone.
Yeah. Do developers ever build like spec flex space? I feel like every flex property I've ever seen is like super old.
Yeah, I mean, really, the closest thing to it are like these kind of small freestanding building parks you see where folks will build, 5 to 15,000 foot grade level freestanding industrial buildings. But as far as
Mhm.
a traditional, what we think of as like kind of the bread and butter 80s vintage flex, you
Yeah,
don't see a lot of people building that anymore. And
yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's a completely kind of underutilized segment, where you can command some pretty high rental rates and, kind of make a skinny tract of land work, where you
Right,
couldn't
right.
really build that traditional large distribution style building. So I don't see a lot of those being built, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's what the developers kind of have cooking in the next 10, 15 years. You never know.
It'd be curious, yeah. Be
I don't
interesting
think
to
the
see.
deals are big enough for a lot of people to bite off on them, but
Okay, right.
I, I've never underwritten one, but I would imagine they pencil out nicely, given that those rates are, double the large box rates.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wonder what if the occupancy ever, yeah, induces somebody to start building them, or like you're
Mhm.
saying, if the site kind of lends its design
Mhm.
or building layout. Um, School. What submarkets or areas in Houston are kind of within the path of growth?
Yeah,
Uh,
so Houston's unique where we're not necessarily landlocked like a lot of major cities are in the country. And then on top of it, we benefit from no zoning here. So our industrial market, as far as land acquisition, is very competitive uh, because it's really you're not beholden to zoning and you can go in any four directions and you're still relatively close to inner Houston. So it's really driven by land basis and then just the fact that the land is dry as far as flooding. And if it's
mhm.
flood prone, you can still mitigate that with detention, but site cost and land acquisition price are kind of the two primary factors that drive um, industrial site pursuits here. I mean,
Oh,
granted, you want to be close to a major thoroughfare and be able to have access for these full container loads to be coming in and out.
yeah.
But I mean, we see large amounts of industrial development activity in all four cardinal directions across Houston. So North Houston, people are building out there. West Houston's really exploded in the past 10 years. East Houston is where it gets a little tight. The
Mhm,
port drives a lot of industrial demand, but the
mhm.
port also falls into separate cities, technically being like Pasadena and LaPorte and Baytown, and they do have zoning. So there is a shortage of land out in those specific cities. So you're seeing a lot of that demand pivot around the Beltway, coming more to South Houston, uh, or more inner East Houston or Northeast Houston off of like Highway 90 and stuff. But truly, we're delivering in every major submarket right now.
Interesting.
So it's not really a path of expansion because, like I said, we're not beholden to the zoning, and it's really a land acquisition if you can mitigate the flood plain. So
You're an investor, let's say like you're a limited partner, passive investor, and you're interested in possibly taking some of your capital, allocating it to industrial. Maybe you like Houston, maybe you like the South in general. What things would, what questions would you be asking, or what things would you maybe be looking for in terms of supply demand, or, um, if you were advising your uncle who's thinking
Mhm.
about investing in industrial in Houston, what would you tell him to kind of look out for?
Yeah, so based off my buddies in both the institutional space and kind of the more private regional space, if you will. It seems like the current appetite in the investment thesis that I'm aligning best with what I'm seeing out there is infill core assets, kind of shallow bay industrial, uh, long-term prior ownership in place with a really nice mark-to-market appeal, an ability to take, like an older infill building that's maybe one tenant occupied or two tenant occupied and carve that up a few different ways. Because at the end of the day, if you're a corporate credit, large distributor, building product supplier, whatever it is, large 3PL, and you're trying to stack inventory high, you need upgraded sprinkler systems. You need to rack to, 28 feet plus, 32 feet plus. And those old infill buildings don't really work for you anymore. So the best thing as an investor you could go out and buy is somebody who's in some functionally obsolete building for them, and they're going to roll out of there in the next 2 to 3 years, call it. And then you'll get a great mark to market play. You can chop that building up 4 ways and really jack the rates up. Those are the GPs I would be looking for today. Now there are home run, ground up, new construction, tilt wall deals all around the place because, like I said, you can find land at an attractive basis here, and you meet your lease up expectations. The rates are still really healthy in that big box space. But the stuff that I'd be really excited about, the stuff that I think is a guaranteed winner if you can get your hands on it in the city of Houston, is shallow bay, mark to market, industrial, infill type sites where there's just a great rent growth story.
Cool. Very cool. Great. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me via my email address, dawson.smith@avisandyoung.com. You can also find me on the Avis and Young website under professionals, I think is what's listed for our Houston office. And connect with me on LinkedIn. I post some market updates every once in a while. Try to post deals as I come through. Trying to get better about my social media, which is why I'm here. But
I didn't see that many posts. I was looking at your LinkedIn page. It's like 5 months, 3 months.
Yeah, it's a little sparse right now, but I've talked to enough people who have found some success for it, and so I'm making it a goal for this upcoming 2025 to get my name out there a little bit more. But
nice.
Yeah. So LinkedIn's great. You'll incentivize me to start posting more.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Well, cool. Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate your time and the good stuff, man. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Val. Appreciate you and love what you guys are doing at Despard.
Thanks. Appreciate that.